the other issue was that 208 oysters. So some language in here about making sure that, the economic impact is minimized on all oysters that are raised primarily for sanitation projects or restoration projects. And I just wish I could find. Yeah, okay, right here. So develop incentives, regulations, and guidelines for industry to promote. No, that's not it.
Oh, it was just there.
Oh,
It was just above, I think.
okay.
Maybe, oh, yeah, oh, you just went by it. So hold on. Go down a little bit more. I just saw it.
Right, ensuring restoration.
Establish regulations and or requirements and or regulations
okay.
associated.
Sorry, I'm dyslexic in this sort of format really just like drives me crazy.
Awful.
Yeah, establish requirements and or regulations associated with propagation or restoration efforts that limit negative impact on existing markets from the sale of shellfish for municipal nutrient mitigation projects and strategies. So that's basically what the language sort of got wordsmithed to. And I think it's fairly comprehensive. You kind of want to make sure that you don't pigeonhole yourself to a point where a town could be using their propagation program to get credits for nitrogen reduction, but not be able to allow people to harvest those and sell them either. So, that's kind of a complicated issue on how to deal with that. I think it's going to be at the forefront if these projects keep continuing to scale up. So those were the three major issues that I felt were left out of the document that I really wanted to address. And let me see if I can find the language in here for the other two. And basically we're at the stage now where this document will go to the task force now, and the rest of the task force will weigh in on the document. And then it will come back to the working group to sort of be amended based on things that might have been missed or the task force wanted included. And then it will be opened up for public comment, and then public comment will have an impact on the document also. So we've been trying to really make sure that, everything is out in the open, and that we take public comment and sort of bring it back into this. And I think now is kind of the opportunity to sort of go like, a lot of the original, original reaction, the first reaction to MSI was so centered around the Cutler bill, which was, a group involved in MSI, that I think some things got overlooked as far as like what could be potentially good, or what do we want as an industry to be in this document, because this document will likely wind up being referred to for years when agencies are asking for money, or to do projects, or to increase capacity. This will be sort of the reference, because it's the last sort of like process that has gone through these various stages of reaching out to the public and compiling data, right? So whenever something like this gets made, just like the Cape Cod Commission bicycle master plan is currently the document that is used to put the bike trail through Wellfleet right now. That input, there was a lot of input lacking at that time period when that commission report was made from Wellfleet. And now we're in a situation where the state wants to do something. There's this plan that had been drawn up. A lot of resources went into that. And, to do anything other than that, you kind of have to say why it's better than that plan, you know? So these sort of documents kind of influence policy going forward. So I just would like, you know, at this point to make sure everyone knows that when public comments open up, that's kind of the time to make sure that, you know, people's voices are heard on anything in here that they really disagree with or agree with or want to see stronger or feel like the language should be different. It's not a huge document, but there's a lot in here compressed down before this final report gets made. So, and then okay. So this was this has been sort of like, we had one last meeting and then they retooled everything and switched around the order of a lot of things. So yeah, so this is what we wound up with for the direct to consumer sales. So the Shellfish Advisory Panel, which is going to be formalized as part of this process, and that's a state Shellfish Advisory Panel, which would serve to the state similarly as the Shellfish Advisory Board serves to the town, to the DMF and to the DPH on recommendations of things, or things would often get run through the Shellfish Advisory Panel as a sounding board that would have no regulatory authority, but could craft, you know, potential ideas that could go forward to maybe become regulation or new initiatives, whatever. So that Shellfish Advisory Panel that it had kind of been dissolved. It was kind of, I'm not even sure how they put it together, but part of the formalizing it is that there's some sort of application process, which I pushed for, so that people who want to serve on that panel have access to a means to do so. And I don't know exactly how that's going to look or who is going to appoint people or how many people, you know, will come from the previous advisory panel. But they'll be charged by this basically. They're not, it's not really an official charge because this is just a strategies document, but to evaluate and recommend potential changes to regulations and guidelines for direct to consumer sales consistent with NSSP and state regulations, and explore other opportunities for harvesters with expanded training and permitting. So
What's behind all of this? And
okay,
letting us ask our questions.
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, unshare. There we go. Now I can see everybody. Okay, shall we move on to the wastewater? I mean, it doesn't sound like we want to move to support or anything on this right now. We want to hear it changed. Am I correct in that?
I'd like to review some of the documents that are available electronically, and I'd certainly recommend holding off on recommending anything until town meeting.
Okay. Anyone want to push anything on that? Nope. Okay. So wastewater. All right. And I have lost my paperwork here. Hold on. So Scott is here to do wastewater.
Hello, how are you? Can you hear me?
Hello, welcome.
Thank you, thank you. Sorry for the time. Sorry for the scheduling conflicts. I'm trying to squeeze between two other things here. But what I can do, if you'd like, Madam Chair, is I can show you 3 slides that might summarize our overall wastewater plan. Okay. And I can do that in less than 5 minutes, and also talk for a couple minutes about what we're proposing for shellfish aquaculture. Okay. So if I may share my screen.
You may.
Let's see.
Thank you for working with us on the time restraints.
Oh, thank you for working with me. My apologies. So can you see this slide, this beautiful view, which I'm sure you're more familiar than me. So we've been meeting with a bunch of different groups, the Selectmen, the Board of Health, Finance Committee, Affordable Housing, et cetera, and Conservation, I might add, as well. So we're thrilled to be before you even briefly here. We've been working for, I guess, the last couple of years almost now, putting together a so-called targeted watershed plan that is designed to meet the Clean Water Act requirements. As I think most people know, I think all 15 towns are in this together on Cape Cod, trying to address these nitrogen issues. And our plan for Wellfleet is a little bit unique, but really quickly, the goals here are to restore ecosystems water quality. As I already mentioned, the real legal driver is Clean Water Act. Something has to happen. The traditional method is to build sewers, and that can happen. That can definitely solve the problem. We've been looking at some alternatives that we think are less expensive. We're also interested in something that have quicker results. When you build a sewer, you're removing sources that might be 5 or 10 years flow time from the bay. If we do things in the water and close to the water, which we've got a number of elements here, we'll get quicker results. We think what we're proposing is substantially less cost than a traditional sewering program. We've also spent quite a bit of time with the affordable housing groups in town, and as you'll see, part of this plan, I think, directs and attempts to sort of, optimize win-win with that group as well. We're also really interested in so-called co-benefits and jobs. And then, of course, climate change is a big driver for everybody. So that's a big part of our plan here as well. This is a quick graphic intended to kind of show the overview of the different strategies that we are proposing, really as an alternative to a town-wide centralized sewer. Maybe I'll just mention for starters, as I think most people know, the town has hired GHD Engineering and recently completed a plan out at the transfer station, which proves that that facility is large enough and permeable enough to take flows from the entire town. If you were to build a town-wide sewer, I think the ultimate flow is up as high as 700,000 gallons per day to solve the problem. So we have a backup plan that can use a traditional approach. But very quickly, these other items that we're showing on this plan, including both the sort of pullouts, but also some of the icons on this list over here, will add up to, in fact, the same reduction in goals. So it's really meant to be a broad plan. We've actually got 8 or 10 elements in there, including something called a permeable reactive barrier along Commercial Street, which is really a wood chip based, so-called nature-based solution, which is being tested in several other places. Looks like it's worked quite well. Our plan also is interested in teaming up on impacts of some of the restoration projects, the positive impacts like Mayo Creek, Herring River. Also part of the backup plan is downtown sewers, which obviously could be connected to the transfer station. We have the 95 Lawrence Affordable Housing Project, which might be one of the first ones that I know of in the state that actually provides a good deal of affordable housing and cleans up the water at the same time. Pretty unique. And I think I'm pretty excited about that, as are, I think, a number of the other people from the town have been involved in it. We're working with Mass DOT to, as many of you may know, there's a project out at the intersection between Route 6 right now and the town entrance area that seeks to redo part of that highway. And our suggestion is, let's fix the nitrogen problem there, because that's a big contributor as well. And then you can see over here on the list, we also have aquaculture, shellfish, fertilizer controls, other stormwater projects. And another big driver is enhanced, innovative, and alternative septic systems. There's a new generation of septic systems that actually also use wood chip bioreactors. There's actually 3 or 4 designs, all of which have been tested at the test center out at the Mass Military Reservation run by the Barnstable County Health Department. Some of you may know the name George Hoyfelder, who started this. He's been looking at a range of different technologies. The ones that seem to be working very well are, again, wood chip based systems. Most simply, it's an extra tank with wood chips and aerator and some limestone in it, and they're achieving 80–90% removal of nitrogen at a pretty reasonable cost. So that's an integral part of our plan as well. And I think, let me just look what my next slide is. Yeah, I think I'll stop. Well, actually, you know what? I'll put this one out there. We've been looking at capital costs between the so-called non-traditional plan. And by the way, this is a 25-year plan, something that's intended to go over 25 years. So when we add up the benefits of the so-called non-traditional things I just outlined for you, we're estimating that the capital costs of this over the 25-year period, I need to keep emphasizing that, is somewhere in the order of, let's call it $30 to $60 million. A traditional plan, which rely on sewers and wastewater alone, probably 150 million or north of that. So we do think there's a benefit here. The challenge with this non-traditional program is we need to have a team of technologies all together. This works. Any one of them or two of them won't work. So that's the plan. We started, as many of you may know, and also maybe I'll stop sharing there just because I don't take much more time, but I'll just say that, stop share, that historically the town has looked at shellfish and aquaculture being part of this plan, in some cases a very large part. In our plan, it's about 5 to 10% of the plan. Our thinking is that there's no doubt that shellfish aquaculture remove nitrogen. It's been proven in many, many places. It's a byproduct of the industry. It's a wonderful thing. As you all know, it provides jobs and all kinds of other good stuff. I think that we have thought hard and long about what types of expansions might occur. And Nancy, we've been working with Nancy Chveta. She's been wonderful to work with, provided us a lot of information. One of my students at Tufts University, Madison Boldick, is here, has been working on this as part of a semester-long project as well, helping develop an initial plan. And what we've come up with is basically a plan to continue a sustainable growth of your oyster and related shellfish industries. Looking at the last 20 years of data that Nancy's shared with us, it looks like on average, the oyster has been growing around 4 to 5%. Our plan is to continue that and to provide the shellfish department the resources that they can sustainably manage and slowly continue to grow it, and then be able to claim the nitrogen credits for that. So I'll stop there, and we have some further details we could go into, but frankly, we've been working with Nancy and Johnny and others, and we have some more specific plans that we've shared with Nancy about maybe where to start some of the first few years in terms of additional culture, additional seed. Nancy, maybe I'll ask you, do you want us to go into that at all at this point, or should I stop there?
Well, I sent it around. I sent the 5-year plan that Johnny and I worked on with Madison and
Okay.
I forget, Andrew? No.
Andrew, yeah.
Andrew, okay. So I could, go over that or answer questions about that too.
Sure, whatever you think. I
question.
don't know how much detail you want to get into, but
I have a question about the comparison of how much wastewater is going to be removed with the non-traditional versus the traditional, because we are looking at a very long-term, what do you say, like 25 years here? So
yes.
are we looking that far ahead at how much material we're removing? Are we going to be dragging by the time it's 25 years from now and we're going, oh, gee, we should have done so much more when we had a chance? Are we looking ahead that far?
Yeah, okay, great question.
Or are we just doing what the state's minimum is here?
No, we're actually looking at the so-called build out, meaning when Mass Estuaries Project did their study of Wellfleet Harbor that they published in 2017, they calculated the existing nitrogen loads. And I should say it's more than wastewater because it comes from wastewater, some fertilizers, and then stormwater runoff, which is why I mentioned the Route 6 project. So they all contribute to the so-called watershed load. And what they did is they calculated existing loads at that time, which is around 2017. Then they also calculated a build-out load, which frankly is about double what it is today. So our plan is geared at both of those. It provides plans over the next 20 years to take care of existing loads and whatever growth occurs in 20 years, and then provides some strategies beyond that for the whole build out. So that's the goal. And we definitely want to be forward looking to make sure that, as you're suggesting, we don't solve one problem and then come back with a bigger one later.
Right. Okay.
Other questions? Frankly, the shellfish budget that we put together at Madison and Andrew have worked on is a relatively small component cost-wise over the overall plan. So if it does what we think it's going to do, it's very cost-effective. We don't want to overestimate it. And I think where we ended up, this 5 to 10% growth seems like well, first of all, it's been historical.
Mhm.
Some people believe the past can be predicted by the future can be predicted by the past. I'm not sure, but we wanted to pick a growth rate and project that over the 25 years so that it was reasonable. And I think what we're asking for is a budget. Part of the town meeting warrant article is to provide Nancy and her department a little bit more flexibility in trying to support these programs that she and Johnny and others are trying to do. So,
Damien, you have a question?
Yeah, question for Scott and I guess Nancy as well. How much of the proposal is reliant on commitment for the town on developing shellfish propagation? Like, is the proposal moving forward to the state with the shellfish as part of the package? It's approved, and then the town is then committed to providing those numbers? Because I'm at a point,
question.
my understanding is that the state thus far does not have a program that accounts for shellfish as nitrogen removal, that accounts for how shellfish used in that program can enter the commercial stream, that accounts for any of the real finer nuances of programs like this functioning.
Great question. First of all, the plan does include shellfish, as I said, about 10%, I think, on the best count of the nitrogen removal over the 25 years. It is not a commitment because it is an adaptive management plan, meaning every 5 years, the town and the state will sit down and assess where they're at. So in other words, if shellfish is doing better than that, then they'll get more credit for it. If they're doing less than that, they get less credit. And you look at other strategies within the list of, I think there's about 8 or 10 technologies, and adjust each 5 years. So the whole point of the adaptive management plan and having multiple technologies, as we're calling them, the strategies, is that we can make that adjustment. Frankly, as one example, the biggest driver in the whole program are these enhanced, innovative, and alternative septics. And we're using a very conservative estimate of how much nitrogen we think they'll remove. I personally, based upon the research that's being done out at the Mass Tech Center, believe that we're going to do much better. And what that would do is that would relieve pressure, if you will, on other strategies to perform. So there's a lot of flexibility in there. And it's a plan. It would ultimately, we hope it becomes a permit, and as part of that so-called watershed permit, every 5 years we check in with the state, see how we're doing, and make adjustments. And by the way, the other part, Damien, to your question is through the Cape Cod Commission's so-called 208 plan, they were able to develop a credit system, at least for planning purposes, for a number of technologies, including shellfish. So we do have a number that DEP does, recognize, and they would allow us to put into the plan. The other thing that's going to happen once the permit is approved and we move forward with this would be there's water quality monitoring in the bay. So the real proof is in the pudding, right? That's what the Clean Water Act really is about. They want to see observable improvements in water quality and also reestablishment of eelgrass in some places they're going to be looking at. So they've set up these so-called sentinel stations. One is right out in the middle of Wellfleet Harbor. We're hearing that they want to set up another one right off of Herring River. So it's maybe a couple of sentinel stations in Wellfleet, and they'll use those over the 25 years to sort of see collectively how all of these different strategies are working together. But again, my belief is that if we have 6 or 8 of these as a team and we have contributions, I think it could work out pretty nicely. So hopefully that answers your question.
That does. Thank you.
How are we going to be implementing the change of septic systems?
Was the first part when, Becca?
How?
How? Okay, so we're working with Hillary Lemos at the health department, health agent, and we have a regulation that we've drafted that the Board of Health has met on 3 times now. And essentially the way it will work as proposed, and they haven't adopted it yet, but they're looking at it pretty seriously, would be that any new systems or upgraded systems. So let's say you want to tear down your house and turn it into a 4 or 5 bedroom house from a cottage is one example. That would trigger this regulation. And you'd have 2 choices. You could put in either a standard INA system, which is approved by the state now, which frankly gets you some benefit, but not a lot. or you could put one of these new so-called enhanced INA systems, and currently there are 3 of them that we've identified, which have really good data. And in that case, our proposal is the town would provide a subsidy as an incentive for the homeowner to select that system over the standard INAs, if you will, which frankly provide only marginal benefit. We're seeing that these newer systems that are in the DEP permitting process now provide a much bigger. So the regulation would provide a subsidy, which is part of the other town meeting warrant that we're asking for, some funding through the health department so they could pay for these subsidies. Yeah.
Is that Ryan Curley who has his hand up? Is that current or?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
So there's a problem with the oyster component. The problem is that it's oyster centric. Wellfleet's been landing an increased number of oysters year after year, but those gains in production have largely been offset by a decrease in production of cohogs. So if you just start graphing out, the oyster landings exclusively, which is what it looks like the current drafts are, even though the previous ones had them combined, you're only accounting for a single species and not the overall production of the shell fishery. And that, yes, Wellfleet has been landing fewer cohogs year after year for a while. So, just looking at the oyster landings does not tell the entirety of the story. Thank you.
If I may respond, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Thank you, Ryan. And you're absolutely right. Those numbers are oyster specific, but our plan is not. The plan would include any and all wild oysters, clams, any shellfish that provides this function. And it's difficult, as I think you'll all agree, to predict population changes in the future. Our theory is by providing Nancy and crew more resources and focusing on 5-year plans that the industry as a whole can build slowly and sustainably. I agree with you. I can't predict which species are going to do better than others. Maybe somebody here can, I certainly can't. But the goal is to have a steady, sustainable increase. The idea is put resources in and help develop it and hope to have a increased outcome. But you're absolutely right, Ryan. The data that we're using to look at potential increases is oyster specific, but the plan is not. In fact, if we did go through the details of what Nancy and Madison and others have been, and Johnny have been talking about, I believe it does involve cohogs and other species. So the plan is focused on what the town believes, the shellfish department believes are the right species to focus on. And that'll likely change over 25 years. Another
I
reason
like
why
that
I
this
said
plan
adaptive
isn't
plan.
based specifically on shellfish. It's actually based on stopping it at its source, which is something that we need to address in this town. So.
Well, exactly. And there's 2 sides to that coin. As I said before, stopping at its source, if you focus only on that, you might have to wait 5 or 10 years to see any results because of the flow times. So our view
but
is—
if we're not working on the source, then in 5 to 10 years, we're
Correct.
still going to have the problem. So we
That's
need to
exactly
hit this
right.
from at least 2 different angles.
That's exactly right. And this plan is probably, I mean, I could give you the real numbers, but I can guess and say at least 50–60% focus on the source and the other 30 or 40% on the ecosystems and the receiving waters. So I think it's a balanced plan in that regard.
All right, Damien, see your hand up. You're on mute.
Too many buttons. Where was it? I in my process where I was just more concern about effect on the industry down the road, and protecting our shellfish industry from, public perception, from different things that could inevitably, or not inevitably, but could come from being involved in wastewater.
Yeah, we'd rather our shellfish not be
Um,
wastewater management. We'd rather it be a
Can,
cultural
Well,
food.
Can I just jump in and say we shouldn't call it wastewater management?
That's the specific question.
Okay.
Can the plan move forward using the shellfish department's numbers as we, as a department, as a community, expand what we view as holistic methods to harvest shellfish and to grow, a whole ecology? Can they use that philosophy and numbers, or are you reliant on coming back again to commitments?
Yeah, I just missed the last part. Or are we reliant on, and I missed it?
On planned commitments. So will the plan then, will we be beholden to, in some form or another, either regulation that comes from further regulation from 208 plans, quote unquote, to kind of paraphrase,
Yeah.
a bigger direction of wastewater mitigation,
Well, if I understand the question correctly, the town is beholden to fix the problem under the Clean Water Act. There are known ways to do that. The most common way is to build a town-wide collection and wastewater treatment system. The town can always do that. The town can decide to do that now, although everything I've heard is that may not be the best solution for the town. But that certainly is a backup plan that will work and the state will accept. Again, there's no commitment here for the town to do any and all of the things on the list. The commitment is to solve the problem. And the plan is designed to be adaptive. And that's really part of the title of it, so that we can do more of one thing and less of another. But the plan includes, the way we've designed it now, instead of being a one technology collection system treatment, which is certainly an option, what we've opted for at this point, for all the reasons I listed in those bullets, is maybe an integrated plan with 6 or 8 technologies, some in water, some at source, might meet those objectives that I tried to bullet better. And the commitment there is, again, not the exact numbers of each technology, but rather the overall success of the plan.
And the management jurisdiction lies within the town. If we grow a 3.5 or 4 inch oyster for commercial harvest, and the county says, you guys committed 5% of your nitrogen mitigation to come from oyster harvest, and it's not working, and underneath your plan, you're only achieving 2%, you need to grow a 6 inch oyster, which isn't commercially viable in this,
Right, no.
What would happen? So sorry about your epic wipeout, and nobody has oysters, and now you're out, you're 5%.
Bad winter.
Yeah.
Right. What would happen in that case is, again, town would meet with DEP. You're not meeting your target for this period. So what else can the town do? More innovative and alternative septics, more stormwater projects, another 95 Lawrence project. They'd look at the list of what else is there to compensate. And then, we have backup plans for sewering parts of the town, like downtown areas. You saw that on the plan. So at some point it may become necessary, or the town might decide they want to build a sewer in the downtown area. That would be another option as a backup plan. So the way we've designed it is that we keep all these things on the table, and we try technologies which, again, look like they're less expensive, locally driven with jobs. And by the way, I do want to go back, and I don't know how we do this quickly, but we really need to stop saying treating wastewater with shellfish, because we're not trying to do that. Never were. What we're trying to do is feed them with the nutrients that they love, give them food, because the food, the nitrogen, is exactly the thing that causes, as you all know very well, other issues in the water column. So it's really trying to get rid of the nitrogen. And as we all know, nitrogen is a good thing. Without nitrogen, we'd have no food anywhere. So food's a good thing in agriculture.
So is biodiversity, and too many oysters can also be a bad thing.
Which is why we didn't want to, we wanted to scale the plan down to something that was much more sustainable, and within the embayment's capacity and maybe historical context. Hopefully that 4 or 5% growth per year is in that. Nancy.
Yeah, Nancy.
So, we fought if you will, sorry, Scott, but the department pushed back hard on what we were perceiving and seeing around us. We didn't want to have what we saw happening in other towns happen here. So the way that we looked at it is, God, you know, if we could do anything we wanted and we had the budget to do anything we wanted, what would we do? And this is kind of like a best case scenario for targeting propagation dollars into specific just 3-year rotational closures, which is something that people have long, you know, we hear it on the flats all the time. They've long wanted us to do that. And it just made us kind of sit down and think, how could we do this in a way which would be almost part like the way that we would do it in our normal operation, but it would allow us to do more. And certainly adding in the clams, you know, it does create diversity. And if it's not going to work after, you know, Mother Nature is Mother Nature, and that's who's in charge. So if we see that things aren't working, we can certainly revisit it, even as we go.
Absolutely. That's right.
And you know, the first time, you know, I think it's the 3rd year. After 3 years, we'll open, and by then we're almost done with our 5-year project. So honestly, you know, if we start to see market influences, we're in time to just take a step back from it.
Right.
If we start to see that there's problems on that level as well.
Yeah, I think, thanks, Nancy. I think this first 5-year segment of the plan is really what I've been hearing the town wants to give a try. They've got a bunch of stuff they want to try, these innovative alternative septics. They want to fix some stormwater issues. They want to, you know, try this permeable reactive barrier, which sounds promising. It'll give the town 5 years to try a number of things that look like they might have some promise and see where we're at. And that's the idea. Again, there's another route here, which, you know, we don't have to do any of this stuff. There's a very clear engineering solution to this problem. But my read from, I don't know how many meetings I've been through in Wellfleet now over the past 5 or 6 years, is that maybe there's a better approach for this town. So that's what this plan says. Unfortunately, I need to jump. I have a class that I'm 15 minutes late for, but I wanted to spend some time here, and I really appreciate it. And I would love to come back if there's another chance to do that and spend more time. Nancy and I have been trying to coordinate this. We've both been missing each other a little bit, but I would love to come back and spend more time with you whenever we can do that, if you'd like to do that.
Yes, thank you so much for spending your time here today.
Absolutely.
We appreciate it.
Great questions. Thank you.
Are we losing Madison also, or is she
Yeah.
available for questions? Okay.
Well, Madison,
Thank you for coming.
Madison, why don't you, if you'd like Madison to stay for a few minutes, I'll excuse her from class for another 10 minutes, if you'd like. Would you like
Sure,
that?
we'll keep her for a couple of minutes then.
Yeah, why don't you stay,
Thank you,
Madison?
Madison.
We'll catch up.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Scott.
Hey there. I'm not
Hi.
going to have as many answers as Scott. I've been on the project for 2 months. He's been on it for multiple years. So just preface that, but I can certainly take your questions here and make sure that they are addressed. Like maybe he could send out an email, but I can also do the best that I can. for you
Great,
guys.
thank you.
Sure.
So do we have other questions about this?
I kind of have a statement more, to Nancy. I was a little confused at the process of which this ended up before the select board and was broken down and then came back to SAB. I think this should have come through SAB. I think that is the whole purpose of us being here. I thought that I didn't realize that the department was working on this, which is really unfortunate.
Just didn't. We did not. It was always our intention to bring it to Shellfish Advisory, and I did not realize either that it was getting broken down like this. And also, it just I didn't realize it. But you're always my first
must
stop.
have realized that it was that you have $200,000 in budgetary movement being presented to the select board through another committee. I do not believe that you weren't aware of that.
I was aware of it. I didn't realize I didn't have my timing right. I was not trying to keep anything from you guys at all. I'm totally struggling to keep up right now. And I didn't, when it got broken down like that by Ryan, which is great because I think it's important that people look at the different pieces, then I was like, perfect, let me bring it to Shellfish Advisory now. But I didn't know that, and I was not very happy about it either, because it took me off guard. It was always our intention to come to you, and we will come to you each year before we do that implementation phase, just to make sure that we're on the right track.
Yeah. I
Believe
feel
me,
like
it's just a function of how fast I'm moving right now. It has nothing to do with me trying to keep anything from anybody. I
feel
try and be a really good communicator.
that the 208 plans were one of the most contentious issue coming up and through the Massachusetts Shellfish Initiative. I think that anyone that had any interest in where that was going was aware of that. And I'm just
I didn't know it
really,
was going to be on
really
the town
surprised.
meeting agenda.
that
I
this
didn't know it
is-
was going to be on this town meeting warrant. I didn't know. I'm sorry.
It is a topic
There's
we've
not good
discussed at
communication
length in the
at all.
past.
I
It
did
is-
not know until I saw it on the warrant that it was going to be on there. I didn't know either. So I didn't know that there was a rush to do it right now.
to
This
do it
was
this
like
year.
something that was, yeah, I just didn't even know. And then I saw it on there, and then I saw it broken down. But, you know, it's not like I don't spend all my time just on that, but I was surprised when it was on the warrant, and I got caught off guard, and I'm sorry.
Understood.
I agree with you, and I want people to be able to weigh in on this.
Rebecca?
Yes.
I'd just like to reiterate that as chair of the select board, I did not know this was going to be on the warrant either. It was brought to our attention a week before it came up that there was a $6.5 million ask for this year's warrant that wasn't broken down in all its components. And Ryan spent a lot of time breaking that down so that each individual section would be presented to the taxpayers as an individual component of the plan, so people could really see what was in it. But the timeline for us on the select board was the same as what Nancy's describing, where we didn't know that this was going to be on this town meeting warrant and that this ask was coming until literally, I would say, the week before it came on our agenda. And
I understand that, and I'm not, I don't mean to be overly critical, but I do feel like there is a plan that has been in the work. I think there's been a lot of input offered to the wastewater committee through the shellfish department. And I'm just surprised that over the course of 2021 and 2020, to my knowledge, there hasn't been any discussion of this plan at the SAB.
Nancy?
So I just want to respond to that, and that's because we just did it this year. You know, we have been talking about things for a long time, and things during COVID, everything fell apart. And then Madison and Andrew and Johnny and I met a month ago, something like that. I just got the plan right when I emailed, when I saw it on the select board warrant. I said, hey, can I have a copy of that plan? Because they were kind of working all the particulars. So I got it, and then I sent it to you guys as soon as I got it. I'm not going to present something. In fact, I think I might have at one meeting earlier just kind of put it out there just so you guys know I'm working on it. You can go back and look at the videos. I believe I might have said like there's something coming up, but I'm not going to present something until I have all the details to present to you. And this is the first draft, which has been completed within the last 4 to 6 weeks. And I just got a copy of it from Madison and Andrew, who've been collaborating, doing all the heavy lifting. Johnny and I sit there and brainstorm. So this is as early as we're getting it. I don't want to present something that's just nebulous. People want to talk about something concrete so they can ask questions about it. And I just got it.
And it's certainly a topic we've had in the past and have weighed in on. So you've probably heard our opinions and have used that in your discussions. We have 3 minutes before we need to move on to the next topic. We've already lost another person, so we are down. First up is the discussion of Wellfleet Shellfish Department's participation in the town water quality planning and watershed permit application. So Nancy, where are we with that?
So I'm going to let Scott kind of give the big picture overview with a very quick PowerPoint, and then Johnny and I are here to kind of go over the plan that we made with the soon to be called Clean Water Committee. I think-
Okay.
is that what it's going to be called, Scott? And we can just talk, you know, it's basically a supplemental propagation plan for the department
Okay,
that will allow us to expand our normal budget.
interesting.
So
All right.
take it away, Scott.
Here we go. I think, let me go back here. I'm usually pretty good at this, but for some reason I'm having trouble tonight. I apologize here. That's not the right one. Hold on. Okay. Now, PowerPoint. Here we go. Can you see that beautiful picture of Wellfleet again?
Yes.
All right. Sorry about that, Nancy. So exciting news here, I think. I spoke with select person Devasto yesterday, and chair of the former waste, or I guess technically still the wastewater committee, Kurt Felix. And we are in the process of changing the name of this due to comments we received with this group, which I thought were excellent comments, to the Clean Water Advisory Committee, because we are not proposing to treat wastewater. We are proposing to reuse nitrogen in a productive way to solve the problems in the coastal waters. So that's a big change here, which I think is an important one. And what I'd like to do with the chair's permission is take no more than 10 minutes to update you. Some of these slides you've seen before, but some are new. So I just want to kind of give you a fresh look, if that's okay.
Mhm.
And happy to take
Sounds great.
questions. So yeah, I did show you this slide before, but it's worth revisiting. The plan we've developed for Wellfleet is somewhat unique to the other towns on Cape Cod. It's broader because we're really focused on a lot of restoration work. Like the other Cape Cod towns, it obviously is prepared in compliance with the Clean Water Act. All 15 towns on Cape Cod are technically in need of updating to get into compliance with the Clean Water Act. Our program is very much focused on quicker results where you can see things happening soon. There's a focus on non-traditional and nature-based, and I could talk a lot about that, but I would tell you this is a very unique plan in that regard. I also can make a strong case that we are really developing a plan that has, I would add the word significantly, reduced costs compared to other towns. I'm very excited about the next bullet. We continue to work with the affordable housing interests in town more and more, including several meetings I had today, which I can talk about later in detail. We're very interested in local jobs, local other co-benefits. And then, of course, we really want to take into account the climate change impacts. So all of those really have a strong bearing on what we're doing. Location. We have a number of these ecosystem restoration projects throughout town, Herring River, Mayo Creek, and then a number of technologies that have been identified throughout the town. And then just a minute on the shellfish, which of course is nearest and dearest to this committee's work. This is a quick graph that Nancy provided me over the last 15 years or so of oyster landings. Admittedly, this does not include quahogs and other species, which have not shown the same progress, but there's a possibility here, we think, of shellfish providing a small component of this program. As I think we've talked about before, many of the other Cape towns are including shellfish in general as part of their nitrogen mitigation plan. I want to be extremely clear here. We are not proposing to treat wastewater, and we'll never talk about that again. We are proposing to recycle nitrogen that is essential. Without nitrogen, you would have no oysters or quahogs. So the idea here is to take that nitrogen that's in the water column and use it to increase the productivity of the systems. And our thought here, and this will lead to maybe Nancy and Johnny's presentation later, is a very controlled, continued, sustainable growth of the industry here, which will, again, in my view, as an outsider, and you all know better than I, continued job opportunities, as well as some nitrogen mitigation. And so that's part of the program. We'd like to make it part of the program. We think it's balanced now. It's only 10%, 5 to 10, about 10% of the program. We think that's reasonable, and we think it's important.
Hey, Scott, it's Tom.
Yes.
A couple questions. In your mind, I mean, I look at this thing from a shellfishing point of view,
Yes.
and we're waiting for a disaster to happen. I mean, are we moving fast enough?
That was gonna be my
The
question.
chart you had where you're doing 30 some a year. I mean, I look at all those big dots that John just mentioned.
Yeah.
Downtown. I mean, are one of those systems ready to fail? And if so, if it fails, what would that mean to the shellfishing community? I guess in your dialogue with the select board or planning board, whoever you're talking to, do you get a sense that are we being too aggressive or not aggressive enough? And then is the 12,500 enough incentive for a homeowner to, put the wood chips in, the INA in there?
Well, first of all, fantastic question. I wish I had written it down. So there were a few questions in there. They're really important, and hopefully I'll remember them. So please remind me. First of all, we're talking to everybody that will listen, and we're going to keep doing that. Because I think this is really critical to the town, and everybody's involved. As Paul Neswicki, the former director of the Cape Cod Commission, said, everybody is part of the problem and everybody is part of the solution. Literally, everybody on Cape Cod. And as soon as we recognize that, we're going to be way better off. Okay. So the second part is the incentive. Is it enough? And the timing. So the project, what we're developing is, as I said before, a hybrid project that includes shellfish. It includes the PRB. It includes all the things I mentioned. Some of those will have what I would call almost instantaneous benefit. And let me define instantaneous. I would mean the same season, within months. So, and honestly, at the top of the list are probably the shellfish. They start filter feeding, as all of you know, literally the day that they start growing. And they filter more as juveniles than they do as adults. So at the beginning of their life cycle, they are performing probably more than anything else on this list in terms of timing. You can't do better than that, in my opinion. The second best in terms of timing might be the PRB and the ecosystem restoration projects. And the reason I say that is because they're right at the water's edge, meaning you start filtering that either with wood chips in a PRB or with salt marshes in an ecosystem restoration project. You're going to be catching the water as it enters the estuary. So those three things, shellfish, PRBs, and actually I'd add stormwater to that too, and the ecosystem restoration, pretty quick, I would say within the season. Interestingly, what virtually all the other towns have chosen as an approach to deal with this problem, which is sewering, is the longest term impact and benefit, because the groundwater moves about 1 foot per day on Cape Cod. So if I can use my cursor here, I don't have a scale on here, but let's just say center of town to here is maybe, I don't know, 1,000 feet. That's 3 or 4 years. Okay. Maybe more, maybe 5 or 10 years. So there's a lag time. so that's, your question is spot on. And what we're doing here is, I think there's also a very logical benefit to treating at the source, which is obviously wastewater is about 80% of the source. Fertilizers are 10% of the source, and stormwater is about 10% of the source. That's what the MEP project says. So wastewater clearly is a major source here. There are also natural sources out in the estuary, and frankly, a lot of nitrogen falls out of the sky as rainfall. So all of those things together, but it's hard to control rainfall, right?
Mhm.
Although
Yeah.
we can support the Clean Air Act, we can elect people that will support the Clean Air Act, and frankly, that has huge benefits in the last decade or two. There's a lot of scientific evidence that, you know, some of the administrations, the last few administrations that have supported the Clean Air Act have made major differences in nitrogen falling in precipitation in the Northeast, like maybe 30–40% reduction, significant. But that's hard for Wellfleet to enact. That's something we need to do at the ballot box on national elections. For Wellfleet, it's three options. It's wastewater, it's stormwater, and it's fertilizers. And 80% of it is wastewater. So to get back to I'm giving you a long answer. I apologize, but it was such a good question. So the wastewater stuff is important because it's a big source, but it's not going to have immediate effect. It's going to be a year or 2 or 3 or 5 or 10, depending on where that happens. Now, you may have remembered, and I went too quickly tonight, I've recently amended the proposed health reg to focus on those systems that are within 100 feet of wetlands, which is mostly the coastal systems. And that's because that's what the existing health regulation says. The other benefit of that is that's within 2 or 3 months flow time of the estuary. So my thought would be, if I was the water czar, I would replace all these septic systems along the shoreline first. If I couldn't replace them all at the same time, I would go for the ones along the shoreline first, because that's going to have the most immediate effect. And that's what the most recent draft of the health regulations suggests. Go for those systems first. And then I'll stop. And the last part was the incentive. Is it enough? I don't know. That's why we're talking to people, including you people. You tell us. The 12.5 is based upon the cost of the technology. You're right. There are other costs. You got to get an engineer to do your design. You got to dig up your yard, and you got to do landscaping when you finish. But our theory is that all that other stuff is going to happen anyways with a new home, with an upgrade, with a repair, or adding a bedroom. But maybe we need to sweeten the pie a little bit. I'm not sure, to provide this incentive. But of course, that is, as they say, all it takes is money. And we could up the 12.5.
Yeah, I look at the, you know, interesting, through my lifetime, we put sewer systems in a town. I was in Rhode Island, and I've seen septic systems go in other communities in New York. You know, and many of the homeowners just went to the contractor and said, hey, if we do these 20, you know, what's the price? Or if we do 5 of them, what's the price? and you tell your story, which I think is very compelling. But then you gotta convince these homeowners to take action.
Yeah.
You could talk forever about all the issues and what's going to happen and how much nitrogen we're going to take out of the system. But everybody's going to think about their pocketbook. And once we get a group doing it, hopefully we can get, you know, other roads or streets or whatever.
Yeah.
I like your idea of, you know, addressing the ones right on the water first, and you know, get the ball rolling.
Well, let me just highlight one thing. The existing health regulation in Wellfleet says that if you're within 100 feet of a wetland and you need to do an upgrade or a new system, you have to put an INA system in, one of the 19 milligram per liter systems. That's going to cost you whatever an existing Title V costs. Let's call it 20 grand. It's going to cost you an extra 10 to 15 to do that. So you're at 20 plus 10 plus 20 plus 15 to put that in. That's the existing reg. Yeah. What we're saying is with this new proposed reg is we're going to give you 12.5K if you go to enhanced INA. So in other words, instead of putting in the 19 milligram per liter system, add an additional 12 to 15, we're going to give you the 12.5 if you put one of the enhanced INAs. So I think that's a pretty good incentive for somebody to say, instead of putting in one of the 19 milligram per liter systems where I get no subsidy, I'm going to put in one of these enhanced INAs with the subsidy, and the cost is about the same. It's very close.
Mhm.
So I think that'll work. I think that, I mean, I'm a homeowner too. And in fact, I'm going to put one of these in myself, and I'm going to pay for it. I'm not going to get a subsidy in I live in Barnstable. I'm going to do it because it's the right thing to do. I think if people are faced with, they got to put an IA in, and the difference in cost between an enhanced INA and an INA is the same. It's really not an additional cost. And in one case, we're going to give you a 12.5K. In the other case, we're going to get nothing. I think they'll go for the 12.5K.
Yeah, sure.
Can I get a clarification on this? Because my understanding currently is that the other time at which you would need to upgrade your septic system is if you sell the property. So when you
Correct.
transfer properties, that's the other time. However, what happens is a lot of these folks, especially in downtown folks, have lived in their houses for not forever, but it's been a family house. They've lived in there. They're continuing to live there. But the people that are within 100 feet of a wetland, there's nothing in this new regulation that's going to force them to upgrade their septic system if they're still living there and their system has not failed. In other words, if it hasn't started posing problems.
Yep.
So
Well,
is that correct still?
John, that's a great question and comment too. That's one of the things we're looking at and we're looking for feedback on, because right now, when you do a real estate transfer, what it requires an inspection of your system. And if the inspector says it's okay as is, then you're good. If the inspector says you have a problem, then you need to dig up your yard and fix it. In that case, that would trigger this INA upgrade.
Well, yes.
We could, the regulation is, I'm sorry, just to finish, the regulation could say, and this is completely up to the town, could say, upon a real estate transfer, you got to upgrade.
Well, that's basically the way it is now. I mean, if you have a cesspool, which a lot of people still have here,
Right.
and it's inspected, you fail because it's a cesspool.
Right.
So then you have to upgrade the system.
Right.
Which is what most people are faced with.
Correct.
And so I'm sure I'm going to be talking to you or somebody that owning a property downtown is pertinent to me. So that can be off meeting here, but I just want to make sure that I'm still correct. That you're not going to be forcing anybody within 100 feet of a wetland that's been living in their house with no problems, who's not going to sell, that they're not going to have to upgrade.
Correct.
Correct.
That's the way it's drafted right now. My whole approach here, my recommendation, because I've seen this in other communities, is not to force people, but to provide them incentives to make it easy.
A lot of people will do that. There are people that will take you up on it, and it's a good goal to educate people that this is the best idea, and if you can do it now while you get credit.
Right. The advantage is here, we have 30 or more years to implement this. So my theory is when people have to dig up the yard and spend a lot of money, that's the time to do something better. And maybe that's the time where the town can step in instead of providing $100,000, which is what it would cost to do a sewer connection, maybe provide something like $10,000 or $15,000 to upgrade the system to one of these enhanced INAs. That's if I can put it most simply, that's what I'm proposing here.
Thank you.
Hey, Scott, one last thing. It's Tom. So, with this town basically surviving with the shellfishing industry. I mean, if we, pollute the harbor, we would be devastated.
Yep.
Are you comfortable enough that you know, you're not getting pushed back, or we're doing the right thing here. There's no other, forget about money for a minute,
Yep.
all right? Because if the shellfishing industry did go belly up, this place would be a disaster. Are you comfortable enough that we're doing the right thing here? Forget about money. I hate to put you on the spot. I just want to get
No. I actually I appreciate you putting me on the spot. Again, if you were to go to conventional approach building sewers, it's going to take 10, 20 years to see benefits. If you go with this approach we're talking about, the integrated approach with all these different technology, you're going to see benefits in the first 5 years, and it's going to get better and better and better. And I agree with you. I mean, I get it. I mean, I've traveled. I've done a lot of traveling, and I see well-filleted oysters on the menu everywhere. I get it. And you know, you want to do something here that is, you know, the other analogy. Let me just maybe step aside here. One of the analogies I've used a lot in developing these technologies is a financial portfolio. If you go to a financial advisor and say, "What should I do with my retirement savings?" None of them say put all of your money into one stock. They say go for a diversified portfolio. Why is that? Why do they do that? This is arguably one of the most important decisions we make in our life for our children, our grandchildren, our retirement. Why would they say that? The reason is because it's resilient to changes. We don't know what's going to happen in the future.
Mhm.
Don't put your eggs in one basket. So this plan, again, provides technologies that will have effect early on. We know that for a fact. And the shellfish is part of that. They really are. They're doing, I mean, they're definitely doing part of the job here, and they do it quickly. So I think, to answer your question, Tom, I mean, honestly, I really am very invested in this project. I'm not working just as a consultant. I really believe in this. I really appreciate what all of you are talking about, and I recognize your concerns about your industry, your lifestyle, and I really think this is the right way to go. It's based on multiple technologies. This is based on science. I believe in science. Some people don't like that. Some people do like that. I think it makes a lot of sense. There's all kinds of studies that show that this stuff works. And I think that if I were, you know, I mean, I think the sooner you can get going on this, the better. And I see Kurt here, Kurt Felix, and I gotta say, Kurt, I love working with Kurt. I know he says he pushes the envelope sometimes. He, you know, but I think that he, more as much as anybody, has been raising his voice, saying we got to get this going, and I really believe that. So that's one of the reasons why I'm excited. The fact that I had a great talk with Michael DeVesto the other day. I really like him a lot. We had a really good talk, and I think he's on board. I don't want to speak for him. I don't know if he's in the room here tonight. I think he has a select board meeting tonight. We had a good conversation with Charlie Sumner the other day, I also worked in the town of Brewster, where he worked before. And, you know, we got to get going on this. And I say we, because I really feel like I'm part of it. And I'm really excited the fact that the town is willing to put this on the agenda for the June meeting, some of these items, despite the challenges that you're facing. And you're not alone. Many towns face these challenges. And we're going to have a fall town meeting to do more. I think that's awesome. That's really exciting. And I think we can do a lot. And I really feel like there's a lot of support for this. So I don't, that's a long way around answering your question, Tom, but yes, I think this is the right, I think this is the right approach. Frankly, the more we can do, the more you can do faster, the better. But as you know, it's a political process. Some people are going to want to drag their feet for one reason or another. They don't believe the science, or they don't have the money, or they have other priorities. You know, there's all those other legitimate concerns. But I think that this plan is something that will have some quick effects I think it'll meet the objectives, and I think it will do it at a very reasonable cost. But I'm going to ask Kurt if he wants to jump in here, because I can see him here. I can see him chomping at the bit.
I did actually want to echo, I wanted to jump on something that Tom had asked about, and that was, are we going to get enough soon enough? And, what are the potential impacts to the shellfish industry? And one of the pieces of science that's come out of this process over the last couple of years was the work that Agnes Mittermeier did, looking at what causes black mayo in Wellfleet Harbor, because that's really the crux of the problem, especially for the shellfish industry. That black mayo is what eutrophication, which is the basic core problem here, actually is all about. And what she found is that black mayo is largely comprised of phytoplankton, decayed phytoplankton. So we've got a filtration problem in the harbor. In other words, not enough filter feeders. The other 15% of it was decaying marine vegetation. So the two biggest components are phytoplankton and marine vegetation. And that's about 95% of the nitrogen component in that black mayo. There wasn't any evidence of human nitrogen in the black mayo, which is why she wants to call it custard, because there's really it is not a wastewater type related issue. So what that points to from a science standpoint is we need filtration in the harbor. John's been working very hard on restoration of Manhattan, one of the other huge, big filter feeders that's missing from our ecosystem. Improving the salt, doing these salt marsh restoration projects is going to have a big impact on increased filtration, especially from the biodiversity that populates a salt marsh. So, just to quickly echo what Scott was saying earlier, this plan produces much faster benefits, and it's also focused on the area where we've got the problem and what the problem actually is. Which is increasing filtration in the harbor. And clearly all shellfish helps in that regard as well. That's the biggest consumer of phytoplankton. So increasing our shellfish populations in the harbor is going to have a big impact on reducing black mayo. So those are, I think, the biggest threats to the industry, Tom. And I think this is a much, much, much more targeted approach at getting focused on the real problem.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Kurt. Thanks.
Well, listen, I just want to say,
Fantastic information.
I honestly want to say these are the best questions I've ever gotten at one of these meetings. I really mean that. Great questions, very thoughtful. I've made a bunch of notes. I learned as much as you did tonight, so thank you. Happy to come back anytime. And I also want to say Nancy has been great to work with. She didn't say anything here, but she's been amazing and a great ally and partner in this project. And big shout out to her.
Well, thank you. Where that was on here.
That's where Johnny and I are coming in.
So can you show us what you sent about the oyster situation?
Yeah,
You
so
mean
hold on.
you-
Johnny's going to talk. I'm going to share the screen.
Okay.
And so you can, if you can either look at Johnny or this, whichever you prefer, but
Okay.
Johnny's right there. And
You don't have to look at me.
All right. Thank you, Johnny.
so,
Yeah, hey, how are you guys? I hope you're all enjoying this weather.
Hey, Johnny.
Great.
And I hope everyone's vaccinated and safe, and we feel good. So anyways, these numbers and plans are a bit conceptual. Nancy and I sort of, put this down, about February when we were, just, worried about some other things besides this. As when we began this stuff with Scott, he had to really talk us off the ledge because his target numbers to reduce nitrogen, the harvest numbers were frankly quite frightening. The initial figure was harvesting 700,000 pieces per acre in Chitman Cove. And that, so since then he's talked us off the ledge, and we feel a little bit better about it. The first thing is that this isn't like a nitrogen mitigation project, for oysters. We're in a town where they have no commercial fishery, and these oysters are just basically thrust upon the market, in the fall when it's at its worst. We would be increasing our propagation activities, independent of this. But if it works out for us, who knows? So we have a very rough plan of some closures in different areas. Now, well, the most important thing about a closure in our mind is that we put inputs into the area before we close it. So in the case of, it's most easily explained in oysters, where we would have some spawning stock and culture to catch the set. For the cohogs, the most important part in our view is the mature contaminated relay stuff that we get from the state. We think that would, spawn much quicker than would aquaculture cohogs. For aquaculture cohogs are basically harvested at 2.5, 3 years old, 1 inch diameter, and they're not really big spawners yet. In fact, if they're fast growing, a lot of them can still be males. The population can be skewed towards, the male gender. And, some of them are like a big ticket capital item. We have an upweller listed like that. That would be sort of a one-time expense. And obviously that would help us pay dividends down the road, beyond the scope. Beyond the scope of this plan. So, and then, when you see numbers like loads of culch, okay, on the first thing, it's 8 loads. All right, our yearly culch budget is 10 loads of culch. With every other year, we kind of luck into a little bit of free culch from our harvest. Wouldn't you say every other year?
Yeah.
Yeah, we get a few free loads to that. So basically, that's between 3 weeks and a month of culching. So there'll be some differences. Obviously, a lot of culch in a different area would require an earlier start than we do. I don't think it'll be a problem. Some of these areas, the culch, it hasn't been getting really munged up with algae. So yeah, that's about it. I can't see the utility in going through each bullet point. I'm sure it'll change. But yeah, that's, and then we would have some, when we say close and reopen, we have discretion on how long to open or whether to early or late or anything, of that nature.
Hey, John.
Yo, go ahead.
Hey, John, it's Tom. When you say you're going to close an area, you're just going to close a piece of the area, right? You're going to put buoys around 4 acres in Logan Bay?
Yeah. And let's not get hung up on the 4 acres. And we're going to take the temperature of our community too. I think, if we were to put some significant inputs on an area, let's say around your neck of the woods, Tom, not in front of your house, but going towards the highway. Okay. Okay. I mean, I think if we put some inputs in an area, I think we could gain support for closing a larger area, perhaps for a longer amount of time. So yeah.
I mean, you think you're getting
no one's going to close. No one's going to close off the entirety of the cove. Nothing like that's going to happen. That can't happen.
Okay. Because I think a lot of guys, do spend some time around the corner from me.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And
if the word gets out,
this is an open book. We don't need to be right. We just want to help out. So,
it is.
Yeah, I think you count on the closures being modest in scope.
Okay. And the way Scott positioned this was 10% of the The whole watershed effort?
That's what he says.
Yeah.
Is that why
and I
this is
don't
how these
think
two
that
tie in?
it's planned. Huh?
This is how these two tie in, right? 10% of the water, whatever he said, 10%, I think he said.
Yeah, I think he's talking a real broad picture of the pie.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I don't think that this page represents 10%. I think I think putting these inputs in an area, successfully catching catching a set, improving the populations of shellfish, and then harvesting them. So I think 10% is you'd have to be wildly successful to get to that actual figure from where we are. I think what we have here just represents a place to start.
Okay. And the quahog thing, the contaminated coal, we've done that before, right?
Yes, we're doing that every year. We are
Yeah.
going to continue to do it.
And
I
that's
just begged
successful.
Nancy, and actually, yeah, I begged Nancy, and she actually got us a few more this year. Okay, and so if you want to, say that you're increasing the quahog spawning stock with a straight face, okay, I think it begins with this this contaminated relay stuff, of which you've harvested and eaten some before, Tom. So,
Yep. Okay.
It's been an Indian neck,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's a big part of it. And in this case, we're thinking about spawning stock. We will value the larger animals. You know what I mean? I mean, right now we did it and we got all little necks. And while we're thrilled about that because our guys are going to love them, but we do think about larger quahogs for spawning stock.
John, Nancy, I got a question about preparedness for reopening. And is it possible to foresee the future? I know there's a bunch of, new targets from the state about boat moorings and where our classification areas. Is there a way to kind of ensure that maybe these areas could be opened in the spring when markets are not late spring, early summer, where markets are thirsty? Can we do that for seeing a little bit with something that would be really beneficial for harvesters?
Yeah, we can do that. But if we sit on a pile of oysters, let's say the area in the railroad bridge, that opens December 1st. All right. So if we elect not to open it, we have to be prepared to look at each other if the ice grabs it.
Right.
You know what I mean? So,
right.
I mean, it's changing, Damien, over the last couple of years, but I've just lived in such mortal fear of ice.
Yeah.
But all those considerations can happen. I will say in the big picture, I don't think entirely managing for the market is the best way to go. You know what I mean? But yeah, for a sort of created sweepstakes situation, opening it up in the spring when the markets are good, is a perfectly reasonable alternative.
Tata.
Yes.
So one of the things that's not in here really, you see these total expected costs by year, is the potential of adding an employee. And we don't really know if we have to see what it would take, but all we know is that we can't be responsible for any reporting that needs to happen in order to meet compliance. So we are just looking ahead and thinking, because this is such a, it's still in the future. And we think that there's a great role for the shellfish department in this in a way that makes sense for our harvesting community. But you know, there's just only so much we can do. So looking ahead to either running the upweller or assisting with the upweller, and certainly any monitoring, analysis, reporting out of our section of the wastewater permit for evaluation at a later time, you know, that would need to be an addition to the department. So not really sure what that's going to look like, but it's just in there as a placeholder. And as Johnny said in the beginning, you know, this is, you know, big, it's a hypothetical. I think we will probably be trying to drill down on it a little bit over the next year in the hopes that perhaps, you know, if the watershed permit comes through, then we can be a part of that and it can be on, you know, budgeted for a town meeting, et cetera.
Okay.
Yeah, Tom, you talked about closing things, and just closing things doesn't really excite, you know, I mean, I know it's a necessary evil and it'd be wonderful at work, but we don't like really get off on closing things. Then we have to keep people out of there.
Yeah, well, you know,
You know what I mean? Yeah, you know, yeah.
Anytime you hear the term closing, you know, people hear half the conversation or 10% of the conversation. They say, oh, no, we're closing Willoughby Bay, you know, or Blackfish Creek.
Yeah.
You know how that goes, right?
Yeah, and we're going to address you know what I mean? I mean, we're going to address our fishing public as we, you know, talk about these areas, citing them, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Hopefully getting a little help from them. And, you know, we really value their advice. I've gotten good culture advice from you know, our fishermen before.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I mean,
you know, it's, yeah.
Absolutely.
And then it's, you know, I think as you talk to people, it's just important that people know that this isn't, you know, the nitrogen mitigation projects that get the bad ink. You know what I mean? Commercial harvest of oysters and shellfish happens 12 months a year everywhere. So, you know, I don't see that as being a thing.
All right. Well, before we started tonight, I had the sense that this program was going to be more of a factor in the whole watershed deal. You know, hearing it's going to be 10%, honestly makes me feel a little more comfortable.
Yeah,
that we don't have to go through extremes.
Someday look at So if you look at someday, get on your computer and look up at the amount in grams of nitrogen accumulated by a harvested shellfish. You know, a piece of harvested shellfish, and it you know, it'll change your thinking a little bit, I think.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's what was good about their plan, is that it doesn't rely on oysters or shellfish in general in Wellfleet. But there are so many other options.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I
and,
agree with you,
know,
Becca.
that is a testament to Johnny and his understanding of the material that we're talking about, and doing a big bit of education in our conversations with Scott and his students that helped create this plan. That was really helpful. We pushed back quite a bit in what is going to work for our harbor and our community here.
Right.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay.
All right.
Okay. I think the amount of reduction being achieved by shellfish is higher than what is practicable.
Okay, I can comment. Go ahead, sorry.
So how many pieces is that, let's say?
So what I've done for the shellfish estimates at this point, again, working with Nancy Chavetta, she's been providing me landings data townwide. And we've used the Cape Cod Commission's technology matrix to convert those landings to nitrogen removal. And currently, that is the only nitrogen benefit that DEP will consider, I think, providing as a credit to the town. So that's what we're using. And what I've done is I've looked at the last 16 years of landings. There is a increased landings in terms of nitrogen. I've taken that that net increase and I've projected that over this 30-year period. Now, the way I've distributed to sub-embayments is based upon current open areas and estimated percentages. But Nancy has requested data, more specific data from each embayment from the state Division of Marine Fisheries, and we're expecting to get that around Thanksgiving. And so these numbers are going to be edited based upon the specific data for each embayment. So currently, this is just a best estimate in terms of, because currently, but we will soon.
Okay, so
that number will get edited.
you use 0.13 grams per piece. Is that correct?
I think that's right. Yep.
Okay, so
For
converting
oysters.
that out, you'd have to harvest over 4 million pieces, additional pieces within Duck Creek, or not Duck Creek, the Cove. And I don't really think that it's feasible to harvest an additional 4 million pieces in the Cove over the production that's already there. I mean, it's already extremely productive area. We all know, but are there any comments on the Cove?
Well, if that number is accurate, 4 million,
Yep.
then that's highly unlikely.
Yep.
The whole town produces about 10 million. Wild and farm raised, predominantly farm raised. I don't see how you get 4 million out of there.
Does, with tidal flow, does the shell fishing around Indian Neck, not just Chipman's Cove, and does that have any effect on the water quality going around? Do you know what I mean, Scott?
Scott?
I'm not sure I do understand your question.
So Chipman's Cove, Chipman's
Can you
Cove
state it?
and Duck Creek are all part of that inner system. And then if you go
Yes.
outside the harbor and there's
Yep.
a lot of shellfish out there, does that have any effect on
I see what you're saying.
yeah, Mayo
Yeah.
Creek or, yeah.
So the way the MEP model is set up, it looks at these exchanges, tidal exchanges between all of these individual embayments, and it takes that into account. However, the reductions that are specified in the MEP report are per each embayment. So the way we interpret that is to meet the overall goals, you need to meet the reduction in each sub-embayment individually. But technically, you're correct that these are all interconnected, so there are benefits back and forth. But that has already been taken into account in the way the MEP model was built. So in other words, we can't take extra credit for a project outside of the embayment, because we have to meet that standard there as well.
Thank you.
Okay.
And I don't know the number of oysters here specifically. I can get back to you, Ryan, with that later.
Nancy has her hand up.
Yeah, I was going to call on Nancy. So Nancy?
Hi. Well, first of all, I just want to repeat what Scott said, is that we're going to have better information when we hear back from the state. We are going to get all of the data from the past, hopefully, 18 years by CCB. So this is CCB 13 that we're looking at. And the other thing is that it's not just Chipman's Cove, it's also Duck Creek up until the railroad bridge, which is basically the only place that significant landings come from. There's very little harvested beyond the railroad bridge. So even though we call that area Duck Creek here in this plan, it's part of the cove. So you just factor that in when you look at that 18% and know that we are getting the actual data by sub-embayment from DMF. And therefore, that should help inform this a little bit more accurately. And just one other thing is that the 10 million oysters are farm-raised oysters. That's not including wild. And we are #1 in the state for wild oyster landing. So I'm not going to dispute the 4 million because I don't know at all, but I just want to kind of put things in context.
Yeah, that's what it converts out to, is 4 million within this sub-embayment, which is really high. But
Yeah.
John's had his hand up, so, and then I'll go to you, Kurt.
Okay, actually, maybe call on Kurt first. He
Okay.
might answer my
Kurt?
question.
Yeah, so during the couple of years that we did the oyster restoration project on the point, we went from roughly a couple of thousand animals to 4 to 6 million with 2 acres of culch. So that was all heavily vetted data. So again, Nancy and Scott are working on refining the numbers. I think other people have added some nuance to, how that might be achievable in this area. But just as an example, we did go to 4 to 6 million just on a 2-acre area.
How many acres is Chipman? Does anyone know?
Mike?
4 million in perpetuity is a lot different than having an off year where there's 4 million oysters on something with mortality rates. I mean, a consistent 4 million oysters on a 2-acre area, that spot on the inside of the harbor has died back several times to nothing. So the idea that you can just have a self-perpetuating 4 million oysters in one area on top of what's already out there, I think it's pretty challenging. And then I don't know how it calculates. Do these have to go to market or to get counted, or how do they tabulate this?
This is based upon harvest.
Yep.
And the other thing I do want to point out, these numbers are projections for the year 2052, 30 years from now. So this assumes 30 years of growth at the existing, or excuse me, the historical rate. No increase in growth, but no increase in growth beyond the growth rate that we're already seeing over the past, I think it's 16 years. This is data that Nancy's provided me so far. So I just want to keep that in mind. It is 30 years out.
Nancy, through you, Ryan.
Yep, Nancy.
Do you know how many wild oysters are harvested in Wellfleet per year?
Hi. I can try and request that data. It's very, very difficult right now to get any data for the past 2 years out of DMF because they're dealing with the CARES Act distribution of relief. But that's why it's taking until Thanksgiving to get the data that Scott and I want. So I just want to, Scott made a very good clarification here about this being just assuming the growth that we have seen in this town over the past 16 years and projecting that forward. That's all this number is. And then number 2, I really am curious myself to see what the data by embayment is. And so again, these are kind of placeholders right now, and I'm not advocating one way or another, but I think that we should expect that shellfish will be some sort of contributing factor here because it is a primary harvesting ground, especially, in the winter months, obviously. And I look forward to seeing the data from DMF so that we can be a little bit more specific here.
Okay. Are there any other questions on this one? Okay, so can we move on? I would just say that this is another area that I'm not 100% sure how much more shellfish it can support. But that's it. Yep.
I just ask a question, what the total number of shellfish that the plan is actually calling for in total in these different areas?
Yeah, I don't know that number. I can certainly get it to you. Is landings in terms of and converted that to nitrogen reduction using the technology matrix. So we can convert that to individuals, Mr. DeVasto, if that's what you're asking for, but I don't have that number.
And
for
this
you
is
at this
assuming harvested product, yeah?
Correct.
That's the only way to get credit for it?
Yes, that's right. I think from a scientific standpoint, there's good evidence that there is additional nitrogen removal that is occurring. I don't believe there are too many people opposing that in the scientific world, but it's very hard to calculate it.
Yeah.
So the decision has been made, part of 208, to be conservative and only allow credit for the actual harvest.
Okay, so this would convert out to be a little bit over 2 million based on harvest.
And I should also mention, this is a combination of clams and oysters. So the numbers, I think, are a little different in terms of number of individuals, but you're probably not too far off as an estimate.
Okay, Nancy?
Hi. The other thing just to remember is that this is both wild and farmed. So what Scott has done is taken the trajectory of the last 16 years, noticed that it has been an increase of 0.92%, right? Something like that, Scott?
92 kilograms per year.
92 kilograms per year. Sorry, 92 kilograms per year. And he has projected that forward. So this is all shellfish, not just wild, but farmed and wild landings as reported by the state to us in aggregate for the town of Wellfleet for the past 16 years. So this is just taking that number and projecting it forward. And honestly, kind of, I'm not sure exactly how the calculations per sub-embayment were arrived to, but as I said, we will get more fine-tuned on that as soon as we get the data for those last 16 years by sub-embayment from DMF. But so this is for actual, this has been projected forward just based on the very small incremental growth that this town has had, even though when you look at the data, quahog landings have gone down, oyster landings have gone up. And this is just a combination of that added together and then projected forward. It's not, there's nothing new happening here except for projecting forward the trend that has become evident in the last 16 years. And we will certainly refine that as we move forward, and we might estimate in some areas, and we might have underestimated in other areas, because the way that the sub-embayment map doesn't exactly match up. So I bet we'll get more removals from, CCB 11, for example, which is the main harbor, than we'll get from CCB 14, obviously. But because they don't exactly match, some areas are going to fare a little better in the long run.
Okay, so approximately how much of Wellfleet's landings are wild and how much are from grants?
I'd have to look at the spreadsheet to see, but obviously, the aquaculture product is heads and shoulders above wild product, but still we're the #1 wild oyster and blood clams, which are not going to be factored in here, and bay scallops. We're not #1 for bay scallops, but we're #1 for blood clams and oysters for wild production in the state.
Yeah,
But I can't
so,
give you exact numbers until I look at the spreadsheet.
so over the last 10 years, the actual production that's happened in the wild has been decreasing. As an overall.
However, okay, and then for the past 4 years, which we only have 2 of the past, so we have through 2018, so we don't have any data basically since my first year here. And we have been doing exponentially more propagation than we had in the past, and we haven't had ice for the past few years. So I wouldn't be surprised if you saw some higher landings in these past few years, but we don't have those yet. And then, as you know, 1 year doesn't define a trend. And so some years we're going to have down years and up years, but overall, over the course of the past 16 years, it's pretty conservative to just say, if we continue 92 kilograms of nitrogen removal, we're on this current track.
Yeah.
This is just that 6 years of data averaged out and put as a trend.
So I don't know how much more intensity of use we can realistically expect out of the pre-existing grants. I mean, some of them definitely can be used to a higher degree. But to expect that production's always going to rise based on the current licensed acreage, I don't know. I don't see how it can't rise forever.
It's just very small. It's 92 kilograms a year. It's like nothing. It is a small but incremental increase year over year for the past 16 years. I don't see why it wouldn't pretty much, it's such a drop in the bucket. Why wouldn't it just continue like that, given everything that's going on? And
Yeah, I just don't
not that we're not gonna have, I'm not saying that we're not gonna have a down year or two, but it's, overall, the trend has been increasing ever so slightly. And we're not adding in anything extra. We're just basing the future on the past.
Yeah, I just don't see additional 2 million pieces coming out of Logie Bay.
And no, it might not. You're absolutely right. I'm not saying that it's going to.
Okay.
We need to get those
And again,
CMF to understand where the opportunities are.
yeah. The other thing I would just remind the discussion is we are obviously talking a lot of adaptive management here, and I fully recognize that it's really hard to plan exactly what the harvest is going to be in the year 2052. As Nancy mentioned, I'm just basing that growth for our options within each one of these watersheds, for example, to adjust the number of IA upgrades. In this case,
Well, I can tell you, if we don't do something about housing, there's not going to be anybody to harvest those oysters. 2052.
Don't change the subject.
Sorry.
So I just looked at some data in my spreadsheets, and what I'm
a
having
third
right
and a
now is
half.
guidance.
Are you losing me again?
Yep.
I'm sorry.
We did, you just came back.
I'm sorry. I was just pointing out adaptive management here, meaning if the shellfish numbers are lower, the INAs might be higher, or vice versa. We might find out that they are actually filtering and denitrifying, and the water quality is better than we expected. So we may need less IAs. So the adaptive management part of this is something that I think really is an important component, something we're not used to doing. This is a new way of looking at this problem, I think. And I think there's some flexibility in here.
Also, I just want to say, I am not looking at shellfish as the end all be all at all for this. Johnny and I have been pushing back pretty strongly that we don't feel that, shellfish is going to be the savior of our nitrogen problems in Wellfleet, but I feel that given the type of extractive harbor that we are, and that extraction is a priority for us, and that we really value our harvests, and we value the people who can make their living on the water, both in farms and in the wild. And so I think that value can be translated into being incorporated for what it provides. I'm not saying that we need to increase it or anything at all, but I think that given who we are as a town, we should incorporate it in there and get what we can out of the fact that we're the number 1 town in the state for shellfish landings. We have a place in this plan. Doesn't have to be a big one, but we deserve a spot in here given what we do.
Okay, so can we go to the next one?
I had I sent out a crier yesterday, and so this is really just an announcement. It's not a topic for a future agenda, but tomorrow night, the select board is going to be meeting on the watershed permit. And I think it would be good for people to be there and hear how it, from all of the things that were discussed and tossed around to what's being submitted. And I know that as an addendum, I don't know if you remember, I want to say it was last year before town meeting, maybe in the spring, we had a couple of meetings with Scott Horsley, and he came and he presented, and then we presented basically, it's like a supplemental propagation plan. So we're not approaching nitrogen mitigation using shellfish like any other town has done. We are blessed with wild oyster reproduction, and we have been noting, and shellfishermen have told us that they are noticing wild quahog reproduction from the contaminated relay, especially in Chipman's Cove. So what Johnny and I, we worked with over 2 years with 2 different groups of Scott Horsley's graduate students, and we came up with a plan for rotating closures where we would do heavy inputs of culch and seed and contaminated clams, close the area for 3 years, and then the next year do another. So these would be rotating closures that would open after 3 years. They would not be sanctuaries. And we feel like this could be a really good way to do concentrated efforts that our budget wouldn't allow us to do, but by tapping into the watershed permit budget, we can, and it will be something that we can absolutely manage. So of course, we wouldn't open it in September and October and November. We would open it, let's say, in March and April when the markets need product. So there's all sorts of things that we put together and we presented here, and we didn't ask for a vote at the time because there was nothing to vote on. It wasn't being presented anywhere. But I think he came twice, and I think the Shellfish Advisory Board supported the work and Johnny and my efforts to think outside the box on this and not do what everybody else has been doing, but just incorporate it into our propagation plan to help the harbor be more naturally reproductive.
Damien's got his hand up over there.
Thanks, Bucky. I wanted to go back to just the previous discussion about nitrate loads, and maybe a future topic could be a flyer about kind of setting a culture of not over fertilizing and maybe not over spraying for pesticides, especially educating shoreside owners, property owners, and just trying to get ahead of that culture before this latest turn, turns differently. I don't think we want to end up with the green lawns of Chatham,
Yeah, absolutely. That might be something to liaise with, like the NRAB
or maybe some of
think
the
it would be
other
Conservation.
conservation. Okay, thinking natural resources like protect the environment, but yeah, Conservation Commission.